Welcome to Hidden Romantic Tales. Please don't forget to subscribe. The rain had just stopped when Emily stepped out of the cafe, clutching her coat tighter around her shoulders. The night air smelled of wet earth and fresh coffee, and the streetlights glistened against the damp pavement. She wasn't expecting anyone, but there he was, Daniel, standing under the awning, waiting with his familiar, gentle smile. Late as always, he teased softly, brushing his damp hair back. Emily laughed, her cheeks warming despite the chill. I could say the same about you. They had been friends for years, study partners in college, shoulders to lean on during heartbreaks, each other's plus one at awkward gatherings. Their friendship had always been safe, steady, and unshaken. But tonight felt different. Maybe it was the way the rain had softened everything, or maybe it was the silence between them that suddenly seemed heavier than usual. "Do you want to walk?" Daniel asked. His voice carried a warmth that made her nod without a second thought. They strolled side by side, their footsteps in rhythm. Emily kept stealing glances at him, the way his eyes reflected the streetlights, the way his hands stayed buried in his pockets, as if holding back something unsaid. She remembered when they first met, how he had helped her carry heavy books to the library. He wasn't the type to speak much, but when he did, his words always mattered. Over time, she had grown to depend on him in ways she never admitted, even to herself. "Do you ever wonder?" Daniel suddenly broke the silence. "What life would have been like if we had made different choices?" Emily's heart skipped. She tried to keep her tone light. "Choices like what? Eating more ice cream? Taking different classes?" He chuckled, but his eyes lingered on her longer than before. "You know what I mean." The question lingered in the air like perfume, impossible to ignore. Emily looked away, her breath catching. She had thought about it many times. What if they had been more than friends? What if the laughter and late-night talks had led somewhere else? But she always brushed it aside, afraid of losing him, afraid of ruining what they already had. They reached the small bridge that crossed the river, the water moving slowly beneath the streetlights. Daniel leaned against the railing, his face serious now. "I've kept something to myself for too long," he said, his voice lower, almost uncertain. Emily's pulse quickened. The sound of water filled the silence between his words. "Daniel, what is it?" He turned toward her, eyes searching hers. "I thought I could stay just your friend. I thought it was enough. But every time I see you laugh, every time you call me when you're sad, I realize I want more. I can't pretend anymore." The world seemed to still. Emily's breath caught as the weight of his words sank in. She had dreamed of hearing something like this before, but reality made it feel overwhelming, terrifying, and yet thrilling. "Daniel," her voice trembled, her hands gripping the railing. "We've been friends for so long. What if this ruins everything?" His gaze softened, full of quiet intensity. "Or what if it changes everything for the better?" Her heart pounded so hard she could almost hear it over the flowing river. Part of her wanted to step back, to laugh it off, to protect the friendship that had been her safe place for so many years. But another part of her, the part that had secretly longed for his touch, his closeness, wanted to lean in, to finally let go of the fear. The night wrapped around them like a secret, the silence louder than words. Daniel slowly reached out, his hand hovering near hers, waiting for her to decide. And in that fragile pause, Emily realized nothing between them would ever be the same again. Daniel's hand hovered close, trembling just enough for Emily to notice. She stared at it, her chest tight, torn between safety and desire. The river whispered below them, and the city lights glowed like distant stars, but all she could see was him, her best friend, the one who suddenly felt like something much more. Her fingers twitched, almost moving toward his. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice softer than the wind. He leaned closer, not touching, just waiting. "You don't have to say anything now. I just needed you to know." Emily swallowed hard. For years, she had imagined what it might feel like if Daniel ever confessed something like this. And now that it was happening, her heart felt caught between fear of losing what they had and a longing she could no longer ignore. "I don't know if I'm ready," she admitted, her voice breaking. "But I can't lie. Part of me has wondered about us too." His lips curved into the smallest, most vulnerable smile she had ever seen on him. "Then maybe it's not just me." The moment stretched, charged with a fragile electricity. She could feel the warmth of his presence, the steady strength he always carried, now mixed with a raw tenderness. And before she could overthink, before her fears could build walls around her heart, she let her hand slip into his. The touch was simple, gentle, but it sent a shiver rushing through her. Daniel exhaled as though he had been holding his breath for years. "Emily." Her name and his voice felt different tonight, softer, deeper, almost reverent. She met his eyes, and in them she saw a reflection of her own unspoken feelings. But just as she opened her mouth to speak, her phone buzzed in her coat pocket. The sound startled her, pulling her back to the reality she had almost forgotten. "It's late," she said quickly, pulling her hand back, her chest aching from the loss of his touch. "I should go." Daniel's face tightened, a flicker of disappointment crossing his features, but he nodded. "Of course, let me walk you home." The walk was quiet, not awkward but heavy, every step filled with unspoken questions. Emily's heart kept racing, her mind replaying the moment by the bridge again and again. She wanted to hold on to it, yet she feared what it meant for the future. When they reached her apartment building, she paused at the entrance. The glow from the hallway light framed her face as she turned to him. "Thank you for tonight," she whispered. "Emily." He stopped, his voice low, as if holding back more than words. "I don't regret telling you. No matter what happens, I don't regret it." Her throat tightened. She wanted to say something, anything, to ease the storm inside him. But fear chained her silence. Instead, she managed a trembling smile before stepping inside. She closed the door softly behind her and leaned against it, her heart pounding like a drum. Her entire body still remembered the warmth of his hand. Inside the quiet of her apartment, Emily whispered to herself, "What am I going to do?" And somewhere outside, Daniel stood in the dark, staring at the building as though waiting for her to come back out. His heart was restless, caught between hope and fear. Neither of them knew it yet, but this night had already set a fire that could not be undone. Daniel remained on the sidewalk long after Emily had gone inside. The rain-soaked street was quiet, but inside him, nothing was still. He wanted to knock on her door, to tell her everything again, but he knew he had to give her space. With a heavy sigh, he finally walked away, each step slow, as though leaving. Her felt unnatural. Inside her apartment, Emily stood by the window, the lights off, watching him disappear into the distance. A part of her wanted to run after him, to stop him from leaving, but fear kept her rooted in place. She pressed her forehead to the cool glass and whispered, "Why does it feel like I've been waiting for this, even if I never admitted it?" The Wium. Next morning came too quickly. Emily tried to bury herself in routine, coffee, emails, rushing to work. But Daniel's words echoed in her head like a song she couldn't silence. At her office desk, she caught herself staring at the screen, without reading a word. Her coworker, Sophie, noticed and leaned closer. "You look distracted. Late night?" Emily hesitated, then forced a laugh. "Something like that." But Sophie, ever perceptive, narrowed her eyes. "This is about Daniel, isn't it? You two are always together." "Don't tell me," he finally said something. Emily's heart skipped. "What makes you think that?" "Because," Sophie said with a knowing smile, "you look like someone whose world just shifted." Emily opened her mouth, then closed it. She didn't confirm or deny, but Sophie's words lingered like truth. That evening, Emily found herself pacing her living room. She wanted to call Daniel, but what would she say? That she was afraid? That she wanted him, but not the risk? Every thought tangled until she finally grabbed her phone and sent a simple message. "Are you free to talk?" His reply came almost instantly. "Always." They met at the same cafe where the night had started before. This time, the rain was gone, replaced by a crisp breeze that carried a quiet calm. Daniel was already there, waiting at their usual table. "Hi," she said softly, sliding into the chair across from him. "Hi." His voice was steady, but his eyes searched her face like he was holding on to hope. For a long moment, neither spoke. The hum of the cafe surrounded them, the clinking of cups and the murmur of strangers, but their silence felt louder than all of it. Finally, Emily broke it. "Daniel, I don't want to lose you. You're the one person I can always count on, but what you said last night, it scared me because part of me wants the same thing." His hand tightened around his coffee cup, but he didn't interrupt. She took a deep breath, her words trembling. "I've been pretending for years that I don't feel something more. I told myself we were just friends, but the truth is, I've thought about us too. I just didn't want to ruin what we had." Daniel leaned forward, his voice low but firm. "Emily, you wouldn't ruin it. You'd only make it real." Her chest tightened. The way he looked at her, so steady, so certain, both terrified and comforted her. She wanted to believe him, to step into whatever this was becoming. But before she could answer, a familiar voice called out, "Emily? Daniel?" They both turned. Standing by the entrance was someone neither of them expected to see tonight. Michael, Emily's old flame, the man who once broke her heart. His sudden appearance froze the air between them. Emily's lips parted, her pulse racing. Daniel's jaw tightened, and in that charged moment, she knew everything was about to get even more complicated. Emily's breath caught in her throat as Michael approached, his familiar stride sending memories she wished she had buried long ago rushing back. He looked almost the same, confident posture, easy smile, eyes that once promised forever but left her broken instead. "Emily," Michael said warmly, as though no time had passed. "I didn't expect to see you here." Daniel stiffened beside her, his jaw clenched tight. He didn't need to ask who Michael was. He had heard enough of Emily's stories over the years, had witnessed her heartbreak when Michael had walked away without explanation. Emily forced a polite smile. "Michael, it's been a while." "Too long," he said, his gaze lingering on her. Then he glanced at Daniel, his brows raising. "And you're—" Daniel's tone was calm, but there was steel beneath it. "A friend." The word stung. Emily, though she understood why he said it. Their conversation moments ago still hung unfinished in the air, fragile and delicate. Now, with Michael here, everything felt complicated, like a thread pulled too tight. Michael smiled, extending his hand. "Good to meet you, Daniel." Daniel shook it briefly, his eyes never leaving Michael's. "I just moved back to the city," Michael said casually, turning back to Emily. "Maybe we could catch up sometime?" "Like old times." Her chest tightened. Old times. The phrase carried too much weight. Sweet beginnings, bitter endings, nights of laughter, and mornings of silence. Part of her wanted to refuse outright, but another part, the wounded part, felt a strange need for closure. Daniel saw the hesitation in her face, and it pierced him. He knew Emily had history with Michael, but the thought of losing her now, just as the truth between them was unfolding, made his heart ache. Emily cleared her throat. "I don't know if that's a good idea." Michael tilted his head, disappointment flickering in his eyes. "Just think about it. I'll leave my number with you." He scribbled it on a napkin and set it on the table before walking away, his presence leaving a storm behind. The silence between Emily and Daniel was heavier than before. She stared at the napkin, her thoughts tangled. Daniel's eyes, however, were fixed on her, filled with a mixture of hurt and quiet determination. "Are you considering it?" he asked softly. Her lips parted, but words refused to form. She wanted to reassure him, to say that Michael was only part of her past. But she also couldn't deny the pull of unanswered questions that Michael's sudden return brought. "Daniel, I don't want you to think—" He cut her off gently, his voice steady but low. I know what he meant to you. I was there, remember? I saw what he did to you. But Emily, I can't just stand by if he tries to come back into your life. Her heart twisted. She had never seen Daniel so openly vulnerable, so raw. His words weren't just protective, they carried the weight of his own fear of losing her. Daniel, she whispered, reaching across the table. Her hand hovered over his, but she stopped short, afraid of what her touch might promise in this moment of uncertainty. I don't want to lose you. That's the only thing I know for sure. He met her gaze, his eyes fierce with emotion. Then don't let him back in. Her chest rose and fell, torn between past and present, safety and closure, friendship and love. The napkin with Michael's number sat like a silent test between them, daring her to make a choice. And as the cafe's door closed behind Michael, Emily realized the night had only just begun to unravel a truth she could no longer escape. The napkin lay between them, a simple scrap of paper carrying the weight of too many unspoken fears. Emily stared at it, her heart pulling in two directions. One part of her whispered that she needed closure with Michael, that she deserved answers for the way he had left her without explanation. The other part, the louder, truer part, kept drifting back to Daniel, to the warmth of his steady presence, to the words he had finally dared to speak. She folded the napkin slowly, her hands trembling, and tucked it into her bag. I don't know what I'll do, she admitted. But I need to think. Daniel's jaw tightened, though he tried to soften his voice. Think carefully, Emily. He's had his chance. Don't let him hurt you again. She looked at him, her eyes stinging. It's not about going back to him. It's about finally putting that chapter to rest. He nodded, but the heaviness in his gaze betrayed him. To Daniel, it wasn't just closure. It was a door he feared might reopen. That night, Emily lay awake in her bed, staring at the ceiling. Memories of Michael tangled with images of Daniel. Michael's laughter from years ago. Daniel's quiet smile from last night. Michael's promises that crumbled. Daniel's steady loyalty that never wavered. She pressed her hand against her chest, whispering into the silence. Why does my heart feel torn in two? The following evening, her phone buzzed. A message from Michael. Just coffee. No pressure. Tomorrow? She stared at it for a long time before typing back. One coffee. That's all. When she told Daniel the next day, his reaction was almost too calm. I understand, he said, though the strain in his voice betrayed him. Just be careful. Emily reached out, touching his arm lightly. Daniel, I need you to trust me. He looked at her hand resting against his sleeve, and for a moment, his resolve wavered. It's not you I don't trust, he said softly. It's him. The following afternoon, Emily met Michael at a quiet cafe across town. He looked older, but the charm was the same. The smile that once drew her in, the confidence that used to make her feel safe before it all fell apart. Emily, he said, standing as she approached. You look even more beautiful than I remembered. She gave a polite smile, sitting across from him. Michael, let's not pretend. You left without a word. You disappeared. And now you're here as if nothing happened. He sighed, leaning forward. I was young, afraid. I didn't know how to handle us, but I've changed. I came back because I realized leaving you was the biggest mistake of my life. Her heart clenched, old wounds reopening. But even as he spoke, she thought of Daniel, his quiet strength, his unwavering loyalty. Michael's words felt rehearsed, almost too perfect. Daniel's confession, on the other hand, had been raw and real. Michael, she said firmly, I don't know if forgiveness means going back. Some things can't be undone. But before Michael could respond, Emily glanced toward the cafe window and froze. Across the street, Daniel stood, half hidden in the crowd, his eyes locked on her. He hadn't meant to follow her, but his worry had dragged him here. His expression was unreadable, a storm of emotion she couldn't name. Emily's breath caught. Michael noticed her sudden stillness and turned, spotting Daniel through the glass. A faint smirk touched his lips. "Well," Michael murmured, leaning back. "I guess some things never change. He's still here, isn't he?" Emily's pulse raced, caught between the man who had once broken her and the man who now held her heart without even asking for it. And as her eyes met Daniel's across the busy street, she realized that the choice she had been avoiding could no longer wait. Emily's breath quickened as her eyes stayed locked with Daniel's across the street. The world around her seemed to blur, the voices in the cafe, the clinking of cups, the hum of traffic. Everything melted away until only he remained. His expression wasn't angry, but it wasn't calm either. It was full of questions, of worry, of something deeper she had been too afraid to name. Michael leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, his voice cutting through her storm of thoughts. "So, it's him. It's always been him, hasn't it, Emily?" Turned toward him, her throat tight. "Michael, you left me when I needed you most. Do you really expect me to forget that because you're suddenly back?" His eyes softened, though his words carried the same rehearsed charm. "I made a mistake." "Emily, I know that now. I thought time would erase what we had, but it didn't. I still love you." The word love hit her like a wave, but it didn't land where it once did. Because even as he said it, she felt no pull in her chest, no warmth in her heart. Instead, her mind kept replaying Daniel's trembling words by the river, the way he had said her name like it mattered more than anything. She stood suddenly, pushing her chair back. Michael blinked in surprise. "I came here for closure, not to start over," she said, her voice steady, though her hands trembled. "And seeing you again made me realize something. What we had, it ended for a reason, and I can't keep holding on to ghosts." Michael's face fell, his confidence cracking. "Emily!" But she was already walking toward the door. Her pulse hammered as she stepped out into the crisp air, her eyes finding Daniel where he stood. He looked at her, uncertain, almost afraid. "I shouldn't have come," he said quickly. I couldn't let you face him alone." Emily shook her head, her voice breaking as she whispered, "Daniel, don't you see? You've always been there. Every time I fell apart, every time I laughed, every time I needed someone, you were the one beside me. Not him. You." Daniel's chest rose sharply, his hand tightening into a fist at his side. "Emily, are you saying—" She took a shaky step closer, her eyes glistening. "I'm saying that I thought we were just friends. I told myself that for years. But last night, and today, I can't lie to myself anymore. Daniel, I don't want to imagine my life without you." For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, slowly, as though he was still afraid this was a dream, Daniel reached out and cupped her face in his hand. His touch was tender, grounding her in a way nothing else ever had. "Emily," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I've waited so long to hear you say that." She leaned into his hand, closing her eyes against the tears. "I'm sorry it took me so long." When she opened them again, Daniel's face was closer, his forehead brushing hers as though asking permission, without words. And this time she didn't hesitate. She closed the distance, her lips meeting his in a kiss that felt like the breaking of a dam. Years of longing, of fear, of unspoken love finally released in one tender, trembling moment. The city moved on. Around them, cars passing, people hurrying, but in that instant, the world belonged only to them. When they finally pulled back, Daniel rested his forehead against hers, smiling through the tears in his eyes. "No more pretending, Emily." "No more pretending," she echoed, her heart finally free. And though the night had begun with uncertainty, it ended with the quiet certainty of two souls who had always been meant to find each other, not as friends, but as something far more. The end.